thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's wonderful to be here. In my view, being a teacher is possibly the most important profession in any society. Yes?
Yes, and it's also an honor to be here. I would like to thank the organizers. I would like to thank His Highness Sheikh Nahyan for being here and inviting such an important gathering of teachers who basically are the force when it comes to how we shape the perception of the students of the future. I mean, for us, as Her Excellency Jamila mentioned, it's the teacher that impacts the way that we see life, we treat each other, we decide sometimes in an early age what we want to be in this world. So I believe it's looking at how creativity and culture are really important, especially in time where certain people or certain countries looks at the differences, or how can we highlight how different we are more than how similar we are. And it's a moment for us to look at what brings us together. And I believe culture and creativity does that. And our work at the Ministry of Culture and Knowledge Development is very much interconnected and interlinked with the work that the Ministry of Education is doing. We do sit in an educational council that's led by His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed. We discuss everything that is related to education. And the moment education or a lesson is very rigid when it comes to math or science, we ask, where's the music? Where are the colors? Where is the output that will just highlight how each individual is different? You know, Dr. Baruto, it's easy for each student at the end of the semester or a year to say, okay, you know what, these are the scores. But the moment we see different paintings, different performances, or different way of wearing their clothes, this is the way that we will start identifying the beautiful and enriching differences.
Yes, I completely agree. Right now, education, in my view, especially in the UK and the States, is focused on efficiency. And this is because we've inherited from a time where efficiency and only efficiency was a very good idea. And biologically, the best strategy to teach efficiency is competition. But the challenge there is that that's a great idea if the world didn't change. But our world is changing. And so what we really need to do is teach children how to become adaptable. Right? Is the most important skill that we can now teach them. And culture, and the culture of the school, the culture of the environment, is essential for teaching adaptability.
Absolutely. It's something we look into when it comes to culture and creativity. And there's, again, one of the pillars that we're working towards at the Ministry of Culture is the national identity. The national identity, yes, it's about your language, it's about your clothes, how you wear your traditional dress, your religion, your values, but how to focus on inner values or the values that as Sheikh Nahyan mentioned, are the values that are embedded during or since the founder of this nation, of respecting others, of different religions, of not judging others because of that. And therefore, even before our arrival to this hall, he was talking about the first church to you, that Sheikh Zayed made sure that he inaugurates. So for Sheikh Zayed to look at building a church before a mosque, this is a very big statement to showcase that it's really important to have this land as a land for everyone. The question is in a classroom with kids. Kids will ask tough questions. They will ask you how old you are every day. Every day. So you stick to one number.
Every day?
Yeah, well,
every
my niece
year.
asks me about my age every day. So
That must be confusing
so far I'm
after-
sticking to 28, but thanks to Her Excellency Jamila now is not 28 anymore. They will ask you, is it okay to decide if I want to pray or not? These are tough questions. They will ask you questions about, why do my friend eats something that is forbidden in my religion? They will ask us tough questions. And a classroom and parents required to prepare that and required to prepare that culture and differences are rich and it's fine. Yeah, this is how they do it. This is how they practice. And religion is not just about rituals. It's more philosophy than just the rituals. It's how it embraces everyone. So I believe it's looking at that national identity and how the national identity is a pillar of your values more than your surface or how you look or how you talk.
Yes, I completely agree. When it comes to creativity, we know that the beginning of creativity is humility, right? To be able to not know. The problem is so much of our education, so much of our society, we are taught to know. We're taught to focus on answers, not on questions. And one of the main reasons, so I'm a neuroscientist, and I study how everything that we do, almost all of our behaviors, is an attempt to decrease uncertainty, right? And so again, to focus on efficiency. Whereas the brain can only learn if it goes to the very place that evolved to avoid, which is to not know. Which means we have to create spaces, and that's where the culture comes in, whether it be the culture of the society or the culture of the school, to create spaces where you actually celebrate not knowing.
Yeah. And it's okay to have different answers,
Yes.
because sometimes there's no correct answer. Sometimes it's how would they express the way they will answer or their ideas in a classroom.
Very true. So it's the nature of the person is to ask a certain type of question, but I would argue that actually science education is an example. Education in general is actually an iteration to better questions. It's not an actual iteration to answers.
Yes.
You're constantly trying to find better and better questions, and asking a good question is really hard because it requires, first of all, being aware that you have assumptions and biases, most of which you inherited. The second is to know what they are. We almost never know why we do what we do. And then the third, which is the most difficult, is to then question them, is to doubt what you thought to be true already.
Yeah.
Right?
And how to encourage that in a classroom is such a critical thinking and the problem solving skills. And this is what Her Excellency Jamila showed us, alluded to her presentation. There are the future skills. Yet again, what are your values as well? What are the values that you embed in a classroom? And that also is, let's say, if I'm in a classroom, and I'll talk about an experience. So my whole life I've been studying here in the UAE. I just studied for 1 year in the US, and it was during my junior high. It was one of the most important milestones in my life, because all of a sudden I'm outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
With students who are from different parts of the world, different religions, different backgrounds. And before starting school, we started going to museums. We started, sharing the food that we eat. There was a day that, each one of us was wearing their traditional clothes. We broke the ice before being in a classroom. We respected each one another differences, because at the end of the day, it enriches you and
Yes.
provokes such questions and eliminates the differences that, or as you mentioned, there's no right or wrong of how we wear our clothes or how we talk or how we perceive many things in the future.
Yes, I completely agree. In fact, there's a lot of interest in diversity.
Yeah.
And as a biologist, we know that diversity is the engine of evolution, right? We can't evolve a system if we don't have diversity. But what is often overlooked is the importance of integration across that diversity. And often when we try to integrate, we try to make everybody the same, as opposed to what you're saying, where you celebrate that diversity, but then you find commonality across them. And that's where you find principles. Principles as opposed to rules, because principles enable you to transcend context. And those are the values and skills that I think we were hearing before and you're speaking to. In my lab, we think that actually one of the best places to teach these skills is science. Because science is actually not a methodology. Science is a way of being. It's a place where you actually celebrate not knowing, where you celebrate asking questions. And we call it the 6 C's: courage, creativity, choice, community, care, compassion. Because if you don't care, you're never going to ask a question, first of all. right? And if you're going to ask a question, you have to have courage. And if I'm going to ask a question about someone else, I have to have empathy. I have to imagine from their perspective. So science is actually that way of being, which actually transcends science. Anything that is creative has these values that we can actually teach within a classroom.
Absolutely.
But it requires the teacher, yourselves, to create that culture and context. And that's very difficult because you don't necessarily know how the day is going to run.
And how to encourage, even in your research centers, even in universities,
Yes.
you don't just focus on people who looks like you. And this is what we are facing currently with many studies when it comes to medicine, when it comes to, when it comes to even respecting one another, when it comes to certain, studies when it comes to disease. How the empathy plays a role, how looking at different people from different backgrounds and different ethnic groups that are part of the whole. It's a global journey. It's not even in the UAE. It's not just the Emiratis. It's the Emiratis and non-Emiratis. And this is where, for us, when it looks at the future of the creative and cultural sector in a classroom, a student who will be part of the orchestra is not just the Emirati, it's the Emirati and non-Emirati, because at the end of the day, they are representing what this country believes in and what it embodies.
That's right. And the young person will, as a consequence, will become more resilient to change, more adaptable, but also the society itself becomes more resilient. We know from mathematics that the most successful systems are the most adaptable, and they are the most, what's called complex. Not complicated, but complex, which means they're diverse but integrated. So if you give me two groups, one group was a lower average IQ from a very different background versus another group which has a higher average IQ from the same background, I want the first group. Because we know that group is going to come up with better solutions. We know this from mathematics. It's actually the aim is not to shift people, but to expand them. And you expand through other people and through interaction.
Absolutely. It will always be looked at into, the way we go back to the teachers. Because we will always go back to the teachers because we're here talking to teachers. I mean, for me, what I remember learning from my favorite teacher is wisdom.
Yes.
Our values are the way to treat one another. I can't say that I remember the certain subject and what exactly was in my textbook, but it's more of how a teacher empowers a student.
Yes.
And such traits that we should, from the beginning, from day one, there will be always an emphasis when it comes to the high IQ students. I'm a believer of both. I'm a believer of the low GPA students and the high GPA students. I'm a believer of the graduates and the dropouts. It shouldn't be the elite when it comes to how we want to define a person. Yes, my mother used to test me after my test. She wanted to double check if I will get a full score. It wasn't an easy process. It's always important for students or for parents to be, to have their kids having the best grades. But again, don't give them tough time. Tough time. As Her Excellency Jamila said, I sometimes see members of my family who would say, oh, I have a tummy ache. Why do you have a tummy ache? So at night, why do you have a tummy ache? Are you pretending? No, I'm not pretending. So what do you have tomorrow in class? She said, I have a spelling test. It starts maybe with a tummy ache, but in the future it might get serious. So how can you fix that? How can you ease up that kind of journey when it comes to our students, and especially in an age where everything is interconnected, where there's an overflow of information.
Yes.
And overflow of screens in front of you. And we're all in front of those screens, and we all look at our average screen time every week, and maybe win when it comes less than the average screen time. So I feel it's also a part of this culture should also empower a person who is, there's a well-being of that individual. It's okay to be average. It's okay to be weak in certain subject, but I'm definite that they will be great in different areas and different skills if we're talking about the future fit of skills.
Yes, I agree. They do have different skills and proficiencies, but also we teach them to certain skills because professions want efficiency, not necessarily creativity. And we also teach to what we can measure, because we feel a sense that we have to score and show improvement. Mm-hmm. So we teach to things that are, if I do a math exam, it's easy to mark that. But if I do a test on creativity, that's very hard to measure. Yeah. But if we could measure it more, we would then teach to it.
Exactly.
Right? And so one of the things we need to better understand is how can we measure these things and how can we make it specific to the individual?
Or how can we embed it with the way we teach?
Yes. So it's about creating an environment where the aim is not to know, but to understand. And where you create the opportunity for the child to make discovery. Okay? Because as soon as your brain makes that discovery, it actually encodes itself differently than if you're just given the information. But if I discover it, it now becomes mine.
And I'll remember it for a long time.
And you'll remember it for a long, and what's more, you'll know why you have it, which means you can now generalize. Because generalize is to be able to be adaptable.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so if the teacher can, and what's more, your brain releases all types of positive neurotransmitters, hormones when it learns. Your brain is wired to learn. It loves learning. What's ironic is so often we try to avoid it. Consider conflict, right? In society, a conflict is to engage in a situation that's different from what you expect. You're in conflict, right? And the way we're in conflict, if you and I are in conflict, it's almost as if I'm trying to prove that you're wrong and to shift you towards me. Yeah. And you're trying to do exactly the opposite, prove that I'm wrong and to shift me towards you. Notice that conflict is set up to win but not learn. You only ever learn if you move, right? And evolution gave us a solution to this, which is play. Play is evolution's solution to step into uncertainty. Right?
And I think it's looking and focusing in ethics when it comes to competition or conflicts.
Yes.
Ethics do play a role. You know, it's and I feel this is also something that you know, the education system or the media system or the system that looks into elections looks at the ethics of things. You know, it's easy to bash one another to win for an election, but where are the values, where are the ethics, and what are we teaching the next generation? And what you said is you know, it's tough again for us in a classroom or teachers in a classroom to look at what is next, because sometimes we also need to challenge the system in a way that students need to know that in the future it's wonderful for you to be a leader of XY. Yet a leader who's very much kind to one another, respecting differences, has rich values, and very ethical to reach their goal or the company or the country's goal is a leader that you will always remember.
Yes.
And this is where we always like to go back to our late founding father. He cemented the base of values when it comes to tolerance, as Sheikh Nahyan mentioned. The way when he mentioned as well, you know, about education is the lantern that lights up your way. You know, he's a leader who didn't go to school. He learned the values from his parents or ancestors or the environment around him.
Yes.
So again, it's what would you embed in your classroom? This is the question. How will your classroom be different than any classroom? They're telling us that.
How will my classroom look different?
Maybe.
My classroom would be a science lab, right? First of all, where the children get rewarded because of the questions they ask. So first of all, we have a program for young children, often from difficult backgrounds, where we use science as a Trojan horse for something else. the first thing we teach them is care. Because if they don't care about something, in some sense, I don't care what they care about. I just want them to care. Because if they care, they're going to ask a question. Then the second thing we teach them is why. Mm-hmm. And then what if. And then observation or wow. And then who cares. That is actually the scientific process.
Exactly.
Right? Those are the skills. And what's more, the soft skills are actually deeply pragmatic. They're not something else other than, and we've shown, for instance, through this program, that we resulted in the youngest published scientists in the world. They published a scientific paper at between 8 and 10 years old, and one of the students became the youngest ever TED speaker. She now travels the world at 18, giving talks to groups, to teachers and to students about women in science education. And what's more, that children can then apply these skills to other subjects.
Yes.
So that it's actually very pragmatic. And wisdom, as you're speaking about, is something that happens when your brain experiences the world. You can't be given wisdom. Mm-hmm. You can be given intelligence, but you can't be given wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Dr. Bellotto, I think our time is off. They're just waving and just ending as much as I'm enjoying the session. But going back just to your point, it's important that we learn from children. Mm-hmm. Teachers should learn from students, from children. My nephew is almost 1 year old. He started pointing at the screen from far away in order to swipe from a box to another, and I think that's the future. We won't end up just touching the screen. It's going to be a matrix-like screen. Yes. So I think we're all students here. Teachers are students, and our students are teachers.
Forever students.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.